Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is episode 125, and this is our practice edition where we talk about improvements made throughout the week and tie them back to lean principles. I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and Arda.
I'm Devin Bedoni of Like and Precision, and our banger of a quote this week: make your workplace into a showcase that can be understood by everyone at a glance. Taiichi Ono.
That is a great goal.
Yeah.
That'll last me a long time.
Right, yeah. Just going to tape this to my forehead for the rest of my life.
Yeah, exactly. As I sort of mentioned last episode, it's sort of top of mind because we're looking at new places and I want new shop spaces. And part of the goal is definitely to make it to really emphasize organization and getting non-production related things out of the production area.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have enough square footage to kind of make that happen. I'm still trying to figure out money and energy and how that plays in. You know what I mean?
I think so.
Epoxied floors, for example.
Right.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Very expensive.
You mean where you're drawing the line at investing in things purely for the sake of appearance?
Yeah, and I think the fact that Taiichi Ono was talking about this suggests that it's not just for the sake of appearance, but yes, for the sake of appearance, yeah, and just
it sounds like really what you're trying to sort out is what is for the sake of appearance and what is so that it can be understood at a glance. Because sometimes it's easy to conflate one for the other, right? Epoxy floors look nice. They're also easy to keep clean. There are many reasons why they are beneficial.
Yeah.
But doing it just because you're epoxy floors are good is maybe not thinking it through far enough. You have to figure out why they're good for you specifically in this instance.
Yeah, I think that's all correct. And I'm right at the beginning, but I do think that it would be really helpful for us to have, you walk in and there's just not a lot of noise, visually. Have things cleaner. Anyway, something to aspire to.
Yeah, very much so. One of my machine salesmen stopped by last year, or maybe early this year. We were chatting about the future and stuff, and I'm feeling all proud about our new space. And he's like, yeah, if you want to get into that type of work, try to get this place a little cleaned up. And I was like, oh, damn, okay.
Yeah.
But also, yes.
Yeah.
Clearly. You want to do medical stuff, it better look like a hospital.
Right, exactly. And I think that is useful for everyone. Not just medical production. Right. But it's really hard to put the amount of time into it that is necessary. It's been hard for me to prioritize that. Yeah.
Maybe this is just my fallback too, but I do think you're digging at some pretty big roots, hearkening back to that quote from a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So am I. Right. It may not be appropriate to be focusing on some of those things right now when there's other gaping holes in the process.
Right. I don't know exactly. So far my experience has been that wherever I focus my time has been worth it. But also I haven't focused on that part. So maybe that is because I have a gut sense that it's not our biggest thing, or it might be that that it would be unexpectedly beneficial. And that the money in would kind of really pale in comparison. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Only time will tell.
Guess anyway, you'll have to try it out.
Exactly.
Epoxy floors inbound.
Epoxy half the floor.
Yeah, right.
Same cost.
Part without the camera.
Yeah.
Should we jump into some stuff?
Let's do it.
Here. I'll lead us off. We had a repeated failure mode.
Okay.
In our job management system. So when we intake a job, we put in a cut length estimate for the material. Yep. Our little spreadsheety thing runs a calculation on that, tells us how many feet we need of the material, accounting for different stuff. That's necessary to order material.
Yep.
For a while, that was also the actual cut length that an operator would use when they went to start working on a job.
Okay.
To cut the material for the part.
Uh-huh.
There was not a distinct like review moment.
Uh-huh.
And you see where this goes.
Too long or too short?
Too long is usually okay.
Okay. I see. It's on the list.
Too short. Anything it's actually both are bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just added a second field. One of them says estimate and one of them says cut length. And the one gets filled out during ordering and the second one gets filled out during programming. And sometimes they're the same, but sometimes they're not.
That is. And how do you make sure that they happen?
Well, I think if somebody...
I guess the tag would be empty if someone didn't punch in the actual...
the field?
Yeah. Like, no, what's the poka-yoke, like, mechanism for...
Oh, I mean, if someone goes to saw material and the cut length is empty.
Okay.
It hasn't been filled out.
Gotcha. So in quoting, you use one, and then...
Yeah.
When you program it, you go punch in the other.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay. That's a smart one.
Yeah. At least it's a flag that if one of them is empty, someone didn't look at this well enough.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's very, very top of mind. We've been working on an SOP tool in Arda and scope creep, and a project management side. And I think I said this a few months ago, but like, it seems to me that an organization's ability to work to SOPs is just like, I could imagine, this is not personal, I would think would be a tremendous leg up, because things like filling out 2 cells instead of 1, that's so easy to forget to do. In the case you just described, it's not, right? In the case you just described, it's pretty awesome, because if you go to the saw and you don't know how long the thing should be, it's like someone missed something. But in a lot of cases, it's kind of like, we just came up with a countermeasure to some problem we're seeing. Let's integrate that into how we do your work. And you're kind of like, at some point, someone's going to forget this, or a new person's going to come in and not know to look for this in this type of setup. You know what I mean? And like, it kind of...
Do you have an example?
Let's see. I mean, this is a dumb example, but like, you come into the shop and... Or for us, Sam tops off the coolant.
Right.
And then he was gone, and I came into the shop, and I did not top off the coolant, and I had no way of knowing that. Yeah. I mean, except common sense. And but there's tons of stuff like that, and so it doesn't get captured anywhere, and so...
But if that... But were you saying a moment ago, if that were an SOP, how would you...
If it were an SOP, then I could replace Sam's job when he's on vacation and actually do an effective job.
Yeah.
And as he learns failure modes of like, oh, when you're cleaning out the chip tray, do it in this order because of this thing or whatever it is, right? Like,
yeah.
As that SOP gets updated, if there's no SOP, he knows that, I don't. If there is an SOP and we actually do the work to the SOP, and those are two very different things, I think. Documenting how you did it at one point in time and then actually repeatedly referencing that document. I'm very curious how that happens. Like, Toyota, I guess, describes it pretty clearly.
Yeah.
And I forget what book that was in. Did the Toyota Way?
I think the Toyota Way. Yeah.
And so it's like the SOP is facing away from the operator, and then the floor manager, or I forget the exact position, part of their job is to audit that it is happening to SOPs or to the SOP. And then if there's ever a question, they can refer to the more intense SOP, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
the whole Kamishibai board thing is pretty cool.
Oh yeah, how's that going? Oh, sorry. Yeah, you were saying.
It's going pretty well. Interestingly, like, I haven't engaged with it much because not a lot of my tasks got put on there because I don't know how to make the cards.
Interesting.
which is a funny failure mode.
How are you making the cards?
Someone made a template.
Okay.
But I think it's like a Word template on like a file server that I don't use. We just need to like.
Sooner will be an Arda.
Yeah. That will change, and that was just an instance of being like, run free, make this thing happen, and it's awesome that it happened.
Right.
Now we just need to make the next improvements. What was I going to say? The cool thing about that is it's sort of like it fails safe, sort of like it's sort of like a dead man switch.
Mm-hmm. In what sense?
Like if somebody has done it but they forget to update, it still shows that they have not done it. So like,
as long as it gets reset at the beginning of whatever period.
Sure, yeah. But I guess the baseline being that like the failure mode there is that someone goes to do something and sees that it's been done, not that it gets missed completely.
Yeah, that was my issue with putting things in like a Google Calendar or something for maintenance stuff.
Yeah, that
event rolls through, and then for whatever reason you missed it or something. It's like
away it goes.
Yeah. Cool. I added, so we have all these empty bins that are ready to accept parts, machined parts, queuing up like in the buffer for our paint department.
Mm-hmm.
And we started doing this thing where like, and we're addressing this separately, but like we've talked about like production leveling on the CNC. I think we have overdone it on minimizing inventory.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to keep the CNC running in slow times and not just be like, okay, we don't machine anymore. And maybe we don't machine the same mix in the same way. But anyway, so the result was we had a towering thing of empty bins because we've been pretty slammed. And every day I walked by it and like just waiting for it to all fall on the ground. So today I made a shelf where those bins get stored.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. This was just sort of an example. Wait, which one is this? This was a different example. We've been doing a lot of we've been redoing a lot of production work, reprogramming.
Okay. Reprogramming because it's new machines.
So this was like just because it was a bad fixture design.
Okay.
We have one customer who has a whole family of parts that are very hard to hold.
Right.
They're all pretty organic shapes. And we've tried a lot of different stuff over time, and what we had kind of settled on, they have a standard interface to the customer's part that they make. These two holes that are always spaced the same. And but so we were using like expanding mandrel pin or like expanding mandrel inserts, but they just were not rigid enough and they would break and bend and anyway. So we had a conversation with the customer about adding threads to these through holes.
Oh, cool.
Because they wouldn't really change the size of the through hole. And then made a new fixture that would bolt from below. So
very nice.
It's going to be a rolling change as every part comes through. We're going to have to reprogram it slightly. But it was a big improvement. It also, every other part that we were doing prior, we had to have an operator stop mid-program to loosen those expanding mandrel clamps, like smack it down, tighten them, and then add a bolt for additional work holding after we'd like bored an additional hole. So we'll get better throughput as well.
Nice.
Anyway, it was it's a whole thing.
That's
a lot of like wasted time scrapping parts, destroying fixtures.
Before.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So we had on that topic, it was very interesting. We had a good amount of rejects with thicker paint. And finally I was like, wait a second, we machine these parts. Like why is it a reject? And there was one sort of ridge between like the blend between two tool paths. And so we've been making these parts for years. Anyway, I went in and corrected that toolpath, eliminated the ridge. It does have a bit of a witness now that I was trying to eliminate somewhere else, but that somewhere else is pretty out of view in the buckle, and it just feels like that's a better failure mode, is to have a little cut, like now the lead in you can kind of see on one of the inner walls, whereas that ridge was fully hidden because it was where the cam rode in the body. Anyway, so fixed that. It was really fun. I mean, we lead very different lives in terms of programming stuff. I haven't programmed a part in a very long time, so it was fun to get back into it and be like, yeah, I felt a little rusty.
Playing an old video game or something.
Yeah.
Nice. We had another update on a repeat job. So we had added a second trunnion to our R450.
Yeah.
And we had this part that we make a batch probably every 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
Like a couple hundred of them. And it required 4 different operations before, 2 rotary operations and then 2 3-axis operations.
Wow.
Yeah. And we were scrapping parts because of in the 4th, the final operation, chips were getting stuck in there and then clamped.
Damn.
And were impacting the part. That was solvable, like with, attention and care. But we were also just having difficulty with like part alignment, the way they were held. So we reprogrammed that to be a 3-op part with 2 trunnions now. So I think we're getting a little faster throughput, better quality, less defects, all the things.
And why not move that over to the 5-axis?
Well, the 5-axis, they couldn't be done in one. They would need some alternative or some final operation.
Okay. Like to clean up the back.
Or some side. So that's part of it. The other part is mostly just like the lanes that we've created in the shop. We are really working to make the 5-axis dedicated to prototype work.
Gotcha.
And not tie it up with anything that's going to take more than a couple days. So this is a part run that's going to go for a week probably.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Didn't want to risk having that machine tied up for that long.
Smart. I had the shelf next to the sandblaster. Once I got started over there, I was kind of cleaning it up. We have weights for what the different bins should weigh when you load them with a certain quantity of parts listed out.
Yeah. Do you have just like a weighing scale or like a counting scale right there?
It isn't a counting scale because the problem with a counting scale is I couldn't find one with presets on it. And so you always have to program it to the part you're doing. And so instead, I just write the absolute, like how many grams is it? And then another improvement we made is we have a standard bin. So rather than having to put an empty bin on it, tear it, then start adding parts, you just turn it on, set it to 0. So the weights include one bin. And we just have them listed out. One of those labels came off at some point, and I hate to admit it, but that's what this podcast is all about. Every time I've done this a lot of times where I go to weigh out parts to sort of clear them through the system. Yeah. Because we need the containers for something else. Anyway, and also they shouldn't linger.
Yeah.
And then the label's missing, and I'm like, I think it was 225 grams. So then I'd weigh it out, and I happen to be correct. But every time it's like I should replace the label, but I was in the middle and I did not stop and fix. So I finally got that label on. What is that reducing, or what is it helping with? I guess like the quote from the top of the episode is kind of like, you need, the answer where the question is, back to like the seating matters kind of concept. Anyway, I will say a larger point is just that I really have been like really deep in sort of just getting ARTA going and trying to keep Austere from running off the rails in the meantime. And it's been kind of hard. And it was really nice to just like back to basics, like get in the shop, get on the shop floor, like make some improvements, make some parts. It was nice.
That's cool. We made some backing up. Measuring flatness on parts can be challenging. Many people don't do it correctly.
It's easy to take measurements.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we had some parts that were really a challenge just because of size.
Okay.
And kind of like brought it home that we needed to approach this. So we had a group conversation about how we're going to measure flatness in the shop. Came away with like kind of two paths to follow. One is for like very small, tight tolerance parts. We might start messing with optical flats.
Mm-hmm.
After some conversations with John Grimsmo, it sounds like that is not going to be great for most of the work that we do. It might come into play on some.
And you're trying to measure flatness, not parallelism, just flatness.
Just flatness.
Okay.
Yeah. That might be good for tight tolerance, very small parts, but in an effort to streamline most of the flatness measuring that we do, we not me personally, but we made some risers that are about, I think, 5 inches tall,
mm-hmm.
that have a single point of contact to the part with a sphere, a small little hardened sphere on the top, and then they're all matched in height. The 3 of them are matched in height to within a 1/10,000th.
Cool.
And so now we have a dedicated way to hold parts properly for measuring flatness.
And so then you're still probing the top of the part?
No, you probe the bottom
from
of
the
part.
bottom.
Yeah. And
Gotcha.
so that's why it can be a challenge, is like how you get an indicator underneath there, maintain access, while supporting the part and keeping it planar to the surface plate.
Interesting. Very cool.
Yeah.
So I mentioned we're starting an SOP tool in Arda. We are on probably a full rebuild number 5. Every time it's gotten really, really complicated to try to encompass all the different edge cases and weird whatever. And it's finally getting simple again. And like definitely a repeated theme has been, and this is just useful, like, I don't know, lean, whatever. We keep coming back to like Eliyahu Goldratt in, I think, Beyond the Goal talks about ERPs getting very complicated because they don't have very good fundamental definitions and architecture.
Mm-hmm.
So like inventory dollar days, though that is sort of a convoluted metric, allows for a unified metric across any part of the business,
mm-hmm.
instead of being like, let's build an inventory module. Okay, what should an inventory module in an ERP do? And then you come up with a whole bunch of things, and now we make an accounting module. And then it's like, oh, we should connect the two. And then you look across the two, and they're talking 2 different languages.
Yeah.
So then you build some translation box between them.
Uh-huh.
But now you need some deep understanding of know-how of how it's architected, and therefore how you should architect your implementation of it, if that makes sense. And what we're finding kind of repeatedly is that if you can boil it down to like a cohesive, unifying organizational system, that a lot of those problems go away. And so in the I mean, I don't think it's worth getting into here exactly what those complexities are, but basically defining how any project that comes through Lycan Precision, how it flows through the shop, and exactly which SOPs are relevant where in a useful way is very quickly can explode in terms of how many SOPs are theoretically possible, because you can have like every project on every operation can have a specific SOP. And sometimes that's true, right? It's like, oh, this part we don't fixture in our typical way, but we actually want to have a typical CNC machining SOP for maybe a particular setup. But then with this one, we actually do this weird thing on that one setup. So now you have a modification of it. And we all do this, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, so yeah, anyway, so it got simple again by just treating sort of, what we were trying to do is architect the whole flow. So you can imagine you'd go like, okay, we do quoting, and then we do that passes stuff off to this department and passes stuff off to that. But that requires you to architect the departments and architect what talks to where and what the routing is of everything, instead of just dealing with these tiny little things of like, okay, what's our SOP for invoicing? What are input materials? What are output materials?
Yeah.
And now if we keep doing that, suddenly input materials you can see from one SOP are actually output materials from another SOP. Yeah. And suddenly you can just sort of link them in the background.
Yeah.
And then build that sort of emergent structure of the company.
Yeah.
Maybe. So that's sort of where we're at now. And we'll see.
It is interesting how like software, on the one hand, it's so simple. It's like, make it match reality.
Yeah.
And then on the implementation, that gets so complicated. I think just because reality is so flexible often.
Yeah. And then rigidity can be a really tempting thing in software. Yeah. Because the second you have really reliable data, you can do really cool things.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, Devin, what is every single, like, make a table of every operation you do.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. And then they're going to change in a week. So I don't want to even spend the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I don't know if that's it is an improvement. It's not finished, but it's sort of like trying to get that architecture right so that it's something we implement at Austere.
Yeah. Nice. This is a funny one. The machinists will understand. So okay. You probably have the Mari Tool tap drill chart.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think I know where this is going.
I probably have 10 of them in the shop.
Yep.
I'm still constantly looking for it. Like, I don't know how many times a day I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to go find one. It's not on my desk. I thought it was on my desk. And then I was at home the other day because I had to watch my daughter. So I was programming parts from home, and I was like, I'm going to have to look up a tap drill chart. Like, I don't remember this. And so I like texted the crew at the shop, and I was like, can you scan both sides? And that's the other part about it is you always like, you look at one side, then you flip it over, and then you look at the other side, and you wait, was that?
Flip
and
it
you
back.
Flip it back.
Yep.
So wow. We scanned both sides of the Mari Tool tap drill chart to an SOPs tab. So now it exists somewhere where you can always find it, and you can look at both sides at once.
Wow. Yeah.
Although unfortunately the scan was not very high resolution, so I think I actually have to do it again.
But hey, incremental. A little better. Yeah. Is there any way of just getting all that into Fusion 360 in the tool library or as a reference?
We have a decent amount of it. Well, we have a decent number of the tools named.
So it's like pre-drill for.
Yeah. But then this was some oddball thread. You still end up needing it.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah.
Cool. We have just a few minutes left here. So we got shirts made. Well, they're in the process of getting made. We got designs made. We can say that.
Yeah.
We got designs made for podcast stuff. I see you're wearing a Lycan Precision hat.
Yes.
So this is 'tis the season for swag, it would seem.
Yeah.
And then I got some Arda shirts made. So going to IMTS, I feel like I need like a NASCAR jumpsuit with the different,
all your sponsors
that
pay you so much.
I would love to talk to people about the podcast, and also I'd love to talk to people about Austere and also about Arda. And it's like I can't wear 3 t-shirts.
You need to have a hat, a sweatshirt, and a t-shirt.
I think that's the dream. We did a cool thing with the Arda t-shirts. Which, maybe this will be useful to someone. We stuck a big QR code on the back, but we made it a forwarding link. And so now anytime we want, we can update where it goes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So for like different events, we can have landing pages and whatever. Anyway.
So smart. So smart. This is embarrassing. We have had an ongoing issue where our lathe tool setter has been off. And
that sucks.
Yeah. And I think
a single source of bad truth.
Yeah. Reliably terrible. I think part of why we have accepted it, we have a pretty different workflow between our mills and our lathe.
Okay.
On our mills, standard operating procedure is you set your tools and you run a part. If it needs tweaks, you tweak it in CAM. And that way you know that, like, if you start with a good tool,
right,
and the program's good.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, on the lathe, we have operated in a very different manner. Part of it is that there's simple... We don't use diameter compensation in the mill, but in the lathe, X...
On the control, you mean?
On the control.
Okay.
Yeah. On the lathe, X and Z compensation are very simple wear adjustments to make.
Yeah.
So historically, that's how we've dialed in parts. So I think we kind of accepted that.
I see. So it's always mushy.
Yeah, it's a little mushy. So we kind of accepted that it wasn't perfect. You're going to tweak it anyway. But we had some pretty serious part scraps this last week that caused a lot of challenges. Because like we only had enough material for one setup spare. We ended up going through two, kind of a thing. Had to track down more material. Anyway, and the reason we hadn't reset it is because the instructions that we got were more or less incomprehensible.
Damn.
For how to redo it. So today we got on the phone, and then Uriel and I put our heads together and figured it out, and wrote a new SOP that is actually legible and comprehensible.
And then sold it back to the vendor?
No.
For $50,000?
Well, part of the issue was like the vendor sent out the installation manual, which I think assumes a level of familiarity with the guts of the control that is not typical for an operator. And then you're also like weeding through all of this other information about installation, trying to figure out what exactly parts apply to what you're doing.
Nice. So you have a good, legible, comprehensible SOP for calibration.
Yes.
And so now are you switching workflows to a more sort of CAM-centric?
We haven't discussed that as a group yet. I think we will, because switching to the like now that we have turning on a mill, I want to make our turning function the same way as our milling.
Yeah, it also sounds to me like, and I totally get this, from a milling perspective, the tweaks are not simple, especially once you have a fourth axis on there, right? You can't just like kind of like fudge it a little and then it works in all dimensions. And also the temptation to have a good program by the end of the exercise. That like later, if you run it again with the same tools, it should make a good part.
Yeah. I think part of it is that like lathe tools are a little bit more like mushy, in that like you buy a 1/2 inch end mill.
Why is
for
that?
all intents and purposes, like it's a 1/2 inch, right? If you buy I mean,
for us,
right? Yeah. For what we do.
Yeah.
A boring bar, it's going to have a shank diameter that is what it is, and then it's going to have some offset to an insert edge. And so like every time you're putting an insert in, you're setting it off in both directions. So really, I think, and our lathe tool setter on the M300 is well calibrated to like a master, but that doesn't always relate perfectly to how it cuts, if that makes any sense.
Because of deflection?
Because of deflection and cutting conditions, all that kind of stuff. So it's a little hard to like just depend on it the same way. But anyway, this is causing a whole reassessment of our workflow.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I found a shop space, I think. Nothing signed, but very excited about it. Reduces wasted motion, commuting.
Yeah.
So wasted human potential, commuting, transportation of myself. No. Anyway, found a shop space. I I think, added space will be really helpful. We finally got our margins dialed in to make wholesaling more exciting to wholesalers.
Oh yeah.
We're not quite there, but we have a path to get there. And then we've finally gotten our packaging to a point where when my wife was in Japan, she went to one of the stores that carries austere products and just sent me a photo and it was very
embarrassing.
It was like our merchandising, it just sucks. And like, it's always cool when some part of your product sucks and people buy it anyway, because it means
the product
there's
is
good
very
merit.
good. Yeah.
But that is not an excuse or something to kind of rest on. I feel like, imagine if every aspect was awesome. So we finally have that in the works, and so I expect some growth over the next.
Nice.
We'll see if it,
Where did you find that margin? Was it just a different way of thinking about it, or was it a process change, or
I think it was the founder of Costco said margin is like cocaine. As you get more, you want more. The way we did it is the lazy way. We increased prices.
Oh, for retail.
Okay. So it wasn't significant, but it was kind of like.
So you didn't. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just
Gotcha.
We actually, what we did is kept our prices the same, but for a lower cost version, and then added sort of a premium version, which was the version we were selling. So it was titanium or stainless pin is where we found that.
Gotcha.
So, yep.
Cool. So, but you did lower prices for wholesale or no?
That will allow us to give competitive margin at wholesale.
Yeah.
Whichever version they choose.
Sure.
So.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Nice. Last couple. We ordered a bunch of ano racking wire in a couple different sizes.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this wasn't me, but learned some really cool things on consistency. And
very cool.
we're able to do a bunch of parts on a tight timeline.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It was a big deal.
That's super cool.
And I didn't have to do it personally, which
That's
is even
also
a bigger
huge.
deal.
On the Arda side, we have been refining our pitch. We have demo days coming up in San Francisco, Pittsburgh, and New York. So just trying to get that pitch really dialed. It's a 3-minute pitch, which is like, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter.
Mm-hmm.
This is all that time. Yeah. And it's fun. The result is really fun because it's, ideally compelling, right?
Yeah.
And when you get there, you're like, ooh, yeah, that's the turn of phrase that communicates this whole concept neatly. But getting there is
painful. Nice. We ordered more smaller whiteboards. Just today, they haven't arrived yet. For distributing as we've talked about, distributing our job tags more to their different workstations instead of all in one easy to view place.
I feel like you should do a write up on this process. It's it's very cool that I think from the beginning, we both sort of put a pin in the fact that pulling all the information to one place was like a blessing and a curse.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it was kind of like, you got to wrap your head around it.
Yeah.
And it seemed like having a holistic view of it allowed for a ton of breakthroughs in how you did things.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's kind of like, okay, this is a good system. Now let's put the information where you need it.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Exactly.
Another improvement for Arda was specific landing pages for different types of businesses, so we can actually speak to this pain points of different industries.
Yeah.
Definitely brings up questions and points out issues with our whole group of skills, I guess, because turns out landing pages, everyone's like, oh, make landing pages. So we made landing pages. Getting the right people to the right landing page is also an important part of the puzzle that we have not cracked. So basically that's sort of paid advertising, or you make I don't know, like, or you do an article that's with a specific publication that you know will be targeted. But right now, our ability to sort of get the right people to the right landing page seems to be a little deficient.
Yeah.
They're still working, and I think all of the time we spent sort of coming up with copy has been insightful. But anyway, ongoing. Marketing is really hard, really fun, really hard. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. We bought a shop vehicle. And motivation there was my personal vehicle, which was being used as a shop vehicle when the shop needed to run errands, was very old, very beat up, questionable reliability. So it needed to be replaced on those grounds, and then also just from a like professionalism liability standpoint, having a vehicle registered to the business, insured through the business, with insurance coverage for my employees seemed like a stupid thing to overlook. It was very hard to wrap my head around what vehicles cost these days.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But yeah, we did that this last week. So
wow, congrats.
Yeah. No more mid-90s shit box.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a good place to stop.
Sounds good.
Thanks all for listening. Always fun. Super excited to see some of y'all at IMTS.
Yeah.
We'll be at the
meetup.
Within Tolerance.
The Instant
Current
Machinist.
booth Instant Machinist meetup. Really excited for that. You can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com. Also at arda.cards on the internet and on Instagram.
You can find me at lichen_MFG on Instagram, lichenprecision.com on the internet. We have a Patreon. Go hit it up, and we'll talk to you soon.